Okay, hi, I'm Ray. I'm currently a social media analyst at the United Nations. I'm working essentially trying to use social media to corroborate violations of human rights abuse. I did this research not in the context of that work, but kind of independently. And I thought maybe I would first start with that, that kind of idea of why I even thought to look at this kind of thing. I did some research previously on Facebook in Myanmar and how Facebook was used by elements of Myanmar society, primarily Buddhist nationalists, and as we now know, the military, to kind of engender a specific narrative about the Rohingya minority in the country, which existed, but which was exacerbated, I would say, by Myanmar. And they did this at a point in which there were attacks on police outposts in Rakhine State, where the Rohingya reside. And this is kind of a triggering point. They kind of took this event and used it to kind of demonize the Rohingya at large. And they used, of course, Facebook to do this. And so I think when Chemnitz took place, and I was here in Berlin, and I've been living here for 6 years, I felt that it was kind of somewhat similar. Like YouTube seemed to be playing the same kind of role, or social media in general plays the same kind of role, whether or not it's in the developing world or the developed world. So I was interested in this. And then it kind of hit home because a relative, a distant relative, which is kind of like this crazy old uncle that you always hear about, sent a link to an interview, and it's called, I think the interview was like, an insider report with Frank Stoner about Chemnitz. And it was about a day after the death of Daniel H. And at first I thought, how did he come across this video? And how does it shape his perception of what actually happened in Chemnitz or about the incident, but then more generally about the narrative about, say, migrants and refugees in Germany. And I thought, why did he choose this particular thing? And then when I found the video, I found that it had over 500,000 views, which for me was quite shocking, only a day after it had been posted. So that's kind of where it starts, I think, for me. That's where I initially did it. So maybe I'll talk a bit about how I did the research, some of the main findings, some of the limitations, I think, potential explanations, and then what I think could still be done in terms of research. So the first approach, I retrieved kind of all of the data using an R library, it's called Tuber, to access YouTube's API. So in the same way that you go to YouTube and you simply type in a search query, I did a similar thing via the API. I only used Chemnitz as a search term, and I got 566 results, which were ordered by relevance. You can choose to return results based on like the date in which they're uploaded, view count, and other parameters. But I did it by relevance, which is, what does YouTube's algorithm think that I'm looking for when I search for something like Chemnitz? Based on those 566 results, I sorted them by view count to see which ones seemed to be the most popular by views. And that's the first thing which surprised me, which is that most of them seemed to be with a kind of particular narrative which was right-leaning. So I took those top 10 and I used another API query, which is to say, look for videos which are related to these videos. So based on the top 10. And then I did like another level, which is to say, now get me all the videos which are related to those videos. So there were kind of two seeds, or one seed was the first one, which was 10. And then it got me altogether 646 videos, which YouTube said were related to the videos, the initial videos that I looked at. Now this is not what appears in the top right, which says like playing next. It's not the autoplay, but rather the videos which appear on your right-hand side, which is just saying like related to a video. And then the date range of those videos were between 2008, so about 10 years. So they go quite far back. Still, the majority of all those videos have been published. I think like 80% or so have been published in 2018, and basically within the month of the incident of this incident in Chemnitz. And then when we looked at it, when I get a bit more granular, I looked at it by the days in which they were published. Basically, this is the day in which Daniel H was killed, and basically more than, of those 646, basically more than 200, or I think about 300 by the end of the month were uploaded basically the day of. And the first video that related to Chemnitz came online at like 9 a.m. The day after he had died. In fact, I think he died during the evening in the hospital. So the 9 a.m. was the first video, and that first video was already attempting to drive the narrative about what had happened. I don't have the title here now, but it's one of the guys who's actually mentioned in the New York Times article. I believe it's by this Oliver Flesch, who's peddling a bit in conspiracy theories. So, and then you could see that by the next day there are more than 60 videos, and then I think around 60, no, so there's about 65 the first day afterward, then 60, then around 30, then 25, and yeah. So what I did next was, this is a kind of chart, maybe I can tell you a bit how it looks like. I took the most popular channels based on the number of views they had, and I plotted them in this kind of graph each day after the 26th. And basically each dot here is a video that's published by the channel. And we can see that, there are some mainstream media like Welt and Spiegel which appear there, and you can see Welt published quite a bit of videos. Spiegel TV only had 1 or 2 or so. And this is actually by a media personality who's talking about their experience while they were in Chemnitz during the riots that took place. And then you can see some of the other ones. You see RT Deutsch, which is, I would say, non-mainstream, which is saying, what really happened in Chemnitz. And then, of course, this is Chris R's official, who took a lot of things where he talks about, a migrant murder in Chemnitz. The situation is getting worse. And this is actually the video which I first came across that was shared with me, which is the Chemnitz and Insider Report. Frank Stoner in an interview with Frank Hofer, who's apparently a native of Chemnitz. And what I found interesting about this video, first it had, so basically they're sized according to the total views. This one, and this one have over 400,000 views. The rest have over 200,000 views. But this one was, I think, in the camp which was really trying to correct the narrative about what happened in Chemnitz. It was saying like, yes, Chemnitz is a no-go area, but it's not because of right-wing rioters, but because of migrants who have been basically destroying the city. That was the general tone of this video. Go next. So a quick network analysis based on the related videos I had, because these ones are only the videos that were initially returned in the search query, like the first search query. This I did pretty quickly in Gephi because I didn't want to do it in R, which takes a bit longer. And it's kind of done through a Force Atlas 2 layout, which is like an algorithm, the way, just how it looks visually. The colors are assigned by modularity, so it assigned a video a color based on its community, where it thought it was in terms of relation to the other videos. First, one thing that's important to point out is like, because the videos all seem to overlap, it's quite hard to define each community, I think, in a very good way, right? Because some are about Chemnitz, and then some are about conspiracy theories. But Chemnitz, I think, is one element that stands out. So I tried to define them based on emblematic videos, which had a lot of recommendations, so a lot of related to other videos, because of YouTube's algorithm. So their size, the nodes or the dots, are according to the number of times that video was recommended by the algorithm. So this blue cluster here is where I would find most of, I thought, conspiracy theories. So this is one of the titles, which is, sorry for the way it's written, but it's actually, my German isn't that bad. It's my translation. I think it's just some people that upload these videos might be illiterate or something, I don't know. But they're really, they lack for punctuation and grammar. So this one you can see it's a conspiracy theory about Antifa planning a civil war with Islamic State and using Chemnitz as a jumping point. And that had a high number of in-degrees, so it was recommended quite a bit by YouTube. Another one, of course, the deep state, I think. It's versus Trump, the mask falling. I think it's maybe more the mask being revealed. And these are all in German, so I've translated them here. It also shows how I think the right wing has become rather international, at least. A lot of these things about the US are also, I think, occurring elsewhere, or they're being adopted elsewhere. And then this is one about Trump, Erdogan Chemnitz, the world at an end time. This video was particularly interesting because it was by purportedly 2 Christian guys, and they were saying that Germany needs to be more Christian, and they would like to see you to move more in a more conservative direction. But they have to kick refugees out of the country. So it was a bit like this. The next community is the one in green. And this was one where you found the Frank Stoner video. So this is I think these are primarily videos which are trying to correct the narrative or trying to drive the narrative in a particular way. So you see, that's one about the truth about Chemnitz. Another one I think is quite similar, although you see again that there is a bit of a tinge of conspiracy because you have this QAnon, which is another kind of niche group that's kind of sprung up, I would say, around Trump as a kind of cult. And then you have, again, you know, I think discrediting mainstream traditional sources of like news. On the top, I think what's interesting about this is that first, it's not clustered with the rest of the videos. There's actually two things going on here. First, it's primarily, I would say, international videos in the international area. So they're not in German. They're usually from the US, I think, for the most part. And here you have, this cluster is a bit more about Chemnitz, but here's really only about, I think, international topics. And there's some tinges of ethno-nationalism. This one here is actually one which ties them all together, which is a video by the Red Elephants, which is also a popular right-wing channel in the United States, which was kind of the main node connecting all of these to these more, I would say, outlandish videos up here. So you had their videos like this one, which is a phenomenon of white flight and the inevitable ethnic conflict. So this is mostly those up near the top. So this is the one, this is this big note here, which we can't see here because it's not interactive, but it connects, I would say, the majority of this to these other videos. And that's the one by this right-wing channel called the Red Elephants. Then you had this video, which I would say is quite simply racist. Black women need to take responsibility. And this is, again, mostly here, up here. And the final cluster down at the bottom is, I would say it's mostly the AfD. So you had videos by the AfD, you know, like a press conference about Chemnitz. Again, a citizen dialogue again with AfD. So I think, you know, it's kind of the time to score political points. And this is simply one that was about the general mood in Chemnitz. So some potential explanations. I think that it warrant, you know, I think that's something we can talk about. The first one is, I think this is an argument actually put forth by Jonas Kaiser, who's, I think he's a researcher at Humboldt, and I think now he's maybe with Berkman Klein Center at Harvard. And his previous research has showed that right-leaning channels are kind of, will dominate the underlying structure of YouTube in Germany. I know they did some research where they kind of crawled through any political-related videos, and then they essentially uncovered that most of the German YouTube channels are right-wing, and because there are so many of them, you're inevitably always going to stumble across, you will inevitably be recommended, I think, videos that lean in this direction. I think it's quite a compelling argument. This is one where it's kind of my own. I think maybe it's only one side of it's kind of working the narrative, and by that I would say I borrow some ideas from Kate Starbird, who's a professor at University of Washington, and she kind of has a term called information operations, where she says that, you know, there are certain actors in society who use events to, and specifically use social media or information systems to manipulate public discourse and civic discourse. And I think in this case, you have a plethora of kind of videos that are mostly, you know, I think trying to engender a specific narrative about migrants and refugees immediately after this incident. And there's really only one narrative that's being shown on Facebook. I didn't see any. I didn't search for Chemnitz and then get any left-wing videos, for example. So that's a term data void is maybe it's a term by Data and Society by Dana Boyd, and I can't think of the other researcher now. But this is, I think, also quite a compelling argument. It's that any kind of search engines, when you search for something and there's no kind of data to be found, you'll usually return low-quality data. And so I think what I think might have happened in this case also is that there is a kind of data void in terms of Chemnitz, because you have to think about it, like one day or the morning of, news agencies and those who care about checking their facts and getting the story right are still doing their research. In the meantime, you have bad actors, I would say, who are kind of filling this data void with a lot of low-quality information. And that's what's being shown to people. And then, of course, there's one which I think New York Times likes to talk about, and I think a lot of media like to talk about, which is that it's the algorithm. I don't discount that, but I think there's enough empirical evidence behind it, because we don't know, for example, how many people, what is the click-through rate on related videos, right? So we can show everyone all these videos, but how do we know they're actually clicking on them and going through? In fact, some of the videos, and that perhaps would have warranted further research, some of the videos that you click on, when you go to them, the views are quite low, you know, maybe 200, 300, 400. So does it, you know, is it having any kind of impact? And maybe that's a second question that I would also end with. You know, I think in Germany only 10% of the population even looks at YouTube or uses YouTube. So what's the impact? You know, I think I would reject the idea that YouTube is this great radicalizer. I don't think that's the case after watching many of these videos. Yeah, I think that's something that warrants more research. I think that's the end of my presentation. Yeah, that's it.